Hello everyone. It's the
7th
ever episode of Internally Screening with me, Rupert.
And me, Adam.
And we're going to be talking about some old fucking black and white films that probably nobody cares about. Yeah, because in fact, I think both of the films we're discussing today actually flopped pretty big. Like, we're talking about Citizen Kane and we're talking about Mank. And Citizen Kane obviously didn't flop critically, and I think eventually made its money back, but I think it was like a commercial flop at the time.
Yeah, that's my understanding of it. Apparently it was put back on the map by a French critic who sort of shed light on it like a decade or so later, that's what really brought it its full acclaim. It was beloved by critics, but then kind of forgotten about for a long time, which is wild to think about nowadays.
Yeah, I think that still happens a lot today. But also Mank flopped because apparently, despite being, another Netflix bid for, because they're desperate to get Academy Awards wherever they can. Which the Academy Awards are very, very begrudgingly willing to do. They apparently didn't even crack the top 10 on Netflix. You look at like the Netflix trending.
Did it not?
No.
Did it never get into the top 10?
That's what I read. Yeah, apparently it just
right.
I think and you think a big name like David Fincher, maybe it's just because we're nerds, we think like, oh,
well, maybe it's just not that gripping subject matter for a lot of Netflix users.
Well, we'll get onto it, but I agree the film doesn't open particularly strong. I'll tell you what will have probably flopped if cinemas were open. You might have heard of the Daily Wire and a particular individual called Ben Shapiro, who has long been bemoaning all of the silly liberals in Hollywood, and it's time for the most oppressed minority to speak out, and that is obviously the conservatives, the American conservatives, the most silenced, hated minority of all. So basically, Ben Shapiro, editor of the Daily Wire, YouTuber, bad taste haver in pretty much everything, he decided to dip his toe into the Hollywood producing field, if you want. Yeah, so he's producing this film called Run, Hide, Fight, which if you go to IMDb and you read the the plot synopsis, it goes like this. 17-year-old Zoe Hull uses her wits, survival skills and compassion to fight for her life and those of her fellow classmates against a group of live streaming school shooters, which has basically been garnering a pretty mixed response. So on Rotten Tomatoes, it's got around 30%. It's got a 13 on Metascore, but has a pretty high user rating on Rotten Tomatoes. And IMDb, it's hovering around a 7. Only 5k ratings, so not a whole lot. So Ben Shapiro is producing this film, and he's put out this video on his YouTube channel talking to the producer of this film. Producer's name is Dallas Sonnier, I think. Basically bemoaning the low critical rating and predicting that as more critics' reviews come in, the critical rating will drop even further. I mean, they're probably right. By the sounds of it, it doesn't sound like a very good film, but I will reserve judgment. Yeah,
I mean, we got to wait until we actually see the thing, but yeah. I mean, this has piqued my interest a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, the premise is basically the whole, how do you stop a school shooting? Well, you don't regulate guns. What you need is a good guy with a gun. So what this film is proposing, ideologically, from what I can guess, is that every school should have a 17-year-old girl named Zoe Hull who uses her wits, survival skills and compassion to take out school shooters. Because
sounds like a logical solution.
Having a gun license in place, some kind of system like that it's too unrealistic. You need to have 17-year-old girls with like an AR-15.
I think what's more problematic to me is once again the vilification of gamers in our society, because of course the shooters would be live streamers. You can't trust those streamers. Anyone that goes on Twitch and watches video game players, they're evil, and they're training on Call of Duty Warzone to fucking shoot up your kid.
Yeah, shout out to Splash Zone Gaming.
I can't believe Ben Shapiro is once again complicit in anti-gamer rhetoric.
I mean, that is now that you mention it, that is a very serious issue with this whole premise. Like, come on. Although, unfortunately, I think school shooters probably are gamers.
I mean, in the school shooters are loners and loners are gamers. But you can't tar everyone with the same brush.
The Columbine shooters played the OG Doom. That was a big controversy at the time.
Oh yeah, it's not even worth going into. By the by, is that Ben Shapiro is getting salty over people going, "Oh, we don't think that," or rather, interpreting reviewers giving Run, Hide, Fight a poor rating as them being politically against the film, which some will be.
Yeah.
But the further point is that Hollywood has it out for the right wing, for conservatives in general.
Yeah, but when we get our hands on the film, when we actually get the ability to watch it, I'm sure we'll look into how unfair the critics are being, and we can read some reviews and we can look at the film and see if they're being unfair. I suspect the film is probably bad, but I'm willing to give it a go. What was more interesting about the video to me was the producer, who was an old. He used to work at this other studio with various shady going-ons there that would take. That's a whole other video's worth of content, basically. But this guy is basically bemoaning how he says, like, there's no room for conservatives in Hollywood, and he's friends with a lot of these people in Hollywood, but they're all unhappy and they're insecure. Imagine if you were one of this guy's friend. You're like, oh yeah, I'm a liberal in Hollywood, but I have a conservative friend, my mate Dallas, and then he goes on a fucking video with Ben Shapiro of all people, and he's like, yeah, well, all my friends, they're insecure liberals. They're all miserable because they're getting taxed too much in California. It's like, oh god, what is wrong? What is wrong with this guy? And also, like, he bemoans, like, he says in the video, he's like, at this stage in my life, I imagine myself owning my own studio by now. And it's like, maybe you're just not that good at your job.
I mean, he's in a position that most people would kill to be in.
Absolutely, yeah.
But
like,
even then, like, weren't you saying before we started recording that the studio he owns, or is part of rather, they produced some like relatively acclaimed films. They're not like A-list films, like you were saying, Bone Tomahawk and Dragged Across Concrete.
Well, yeah, he was involved in two films directed by S. Craig Zahler, who's like a kind of he's like even though he's definitely a conservative, you can watch both of those films and glean immediately that the guy's a conservative. They're both not successful really, but very acclaimed films. Yeah,
those films are, well, I've actually not seen either of them, but they're both acclaimed. They both featuring like A-list actors like Mel Gibson and Kurt Russell. Your opinions on Mel Gibson, you don't have to like the dude, but the
good
point
actor.
being is that he's a good actor and he is very popular even still. And those films, whilst not these huge Hollywood blockbusters, were still, critically well received and really enjoyed amongst cinephile communities. So it's kind of a flawed argument when the films you yourself are making that are already conservative are being successful.
Yeah.
The reason that they're not huge is because the studio and production of it isn't huge. The stories you're telling aren't huge. Maybe they were intending Run, Hide, Fight to be this, a blockbuster contender or like an underdog contender, like a Reservoir Dogs or something. But I mean, don't know.
Who knows? That could have happened. I mean, the other thing is, like, it's just hypocritical to come from these kind of people, because I thought, like, liberals and leftists were the ones who blamed their lack of success on the system. If people really hate Black Panther and they really hate, I don't know, Captain Marvel or Wonder Woman or whatever, as much as, because they pose this whole thing of like the critical divide between the audience and the critics, where the audience really know what's up and the critics are all kind of liberal sellouts or whatever. If that's true, then how come all the, and then the whole like go woke go broke thing, but if that's true, how come all of these films make so much money?
I was very confused the first time I heard the go woke go broke thing. I thought, how is that in any way accurate?
How is that how it works?
Like I heard it and I thought people were like saying go woke or go broke. Like, oh, you have to conform because And I get it, like, not everything has to be the super leftist idea, but like, and that's not what we're advocating for either. We're more just trying to poke holes in this idea that this sort of conservative victim complex that a lot of people seem to have, where because they hear something online that doesn't fit their worldview, that they see reviews going, positive reviews for something they disagree with and negative stuff for stuff they do agree with, they're like, oh, the world's out to get me. But it clearly isn't. If you take it away from these incredibly small sample sizes, you'll see a bunch of leftist and liberal films that no one fucking likes, and a bunch of right-wing films that everyone fucking adores. Yeah. You know, I was saying to you, Rupert, like, you could extrapolate the story of Run, Hide, Fight. You know, a good girl with a gun fighting off a bunch of murderous lunatics. Have you ever seen fucking Die Hard? It's the same shit. It's pro-cop, which is not very popular nowadays. It's good guy with a gun. Like, there's no like, oh yeah, just talk to the villains. You know, violence isn't the answer. No, he blows the fucking shit out of all these characters, but it doesn't matter. It just slaps. It slaps. You don't necessarily extrapolate like, oh, this is a right-wing film. You go, if you really thought about it, it kind of is. But the film is just really well written. A good film is able to communicate those ideas in a way that is agreeable to a large proportion of people. A film that may have certain ideals and is bad at communicating those ideals will make people uncomfortable or just reject them, you know, and sort of see through the thin veneer of what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
So perhaps that's what's happened this time. Regardless, these people need to stop being so goddamn sensitive all the time.
Don't be such a snowflake, Ben Shapiro. Nobody cares if people don't like
He would lose his job. He wouldn't have a job if he couldn't be sensitive about stuff.
That's true. He's a professional snowflake.
He is literally a professional snowflake. If he can't commentate on stuff.
That's a good way to put it.
So as we mentioned earlier, the first film, the more modern of the two films we were going to talk about today is Mank. Came out a little bit ago last year. We did mean to talk about it closer to the time, but life got in the way as it does during this pandemic. Still a really noteworthy film that we were eager to kind of sink our teeth into. The first David Fincher film since 2014, I believe.
It's been so long.
So, people have been eager to see more from Fincher, and well, it's quite it's a very interesting subject matter in its discussion of Citizen Kane. It's kind of background around such a sort of landmark historical film, and to my knowledge, not many films have really delved into the sort of biography and the history of Citizen Kane. One interesting fact of this that I thought that I came across just now, which I thought was really eye-opening, was this film was supposed to come out in the late 90s. It was going to be the film he did after The Game. It was going to have the now, shamed and outcast Kevin Spacey as the lead. So in a way, a mixed blessing, that he didn't get to make it when he wanted to. But it was written by David Fincher's father, Jack Fincher, who sadly passed away long before he was able to see this come to fruition. And I imagine that his passing was part of what delayed this film, because I imagine, holding on to a script like this would have been quite like an emotionally harrowing thing. Yeah. But anyway, let us get into the meat of it. Like, what did we think of the film, Rupert? What? Because I personally was very excited.
Yeah, same.
I love Citizen Kane and I love David Fincher. So I thought, bam, a Fincher film about Citizen Kane is going to be fireworks. It's going to be electric.
Yeah, well, it's no secret if you happen to have watched the episode we did on The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. It was basically just me and you gushing over David Fincher's like whole aesthetic and style.
And I'd do it again.
Yeah, and I'll do it again. And I still, love all David Fincher's films and that. But I think I understood what he was going for eventually. It's most similar, I think, to The Social Network, where The Social Network is like a film about Facebook that really has very little to do with Facebook itself. And it's kind of just like you use Facebook, in that it's also, you know, massively historically inaccurate, which apparently this film also is. Not that that really matters in any meaningful way, in my opinion. It's massively historically inaccurate, and it basically uses this setup of how Herman Mankiewicz went through the process of writing Citizen Kane, and just, you know, some things that happened in his life, and uses that as a background to tell, you know, its own story, which sounds really good on paper. But like this film, it was so... I don't know what was going on with the script. I don't want to say, like... I don't want to, like, prod or, like, psychoanalyze what was maybe going on. That maybe... Because the script is a fucking mess, really. Like... Really, I don't know what this film is going for at any given point. It's quite like confused, and it seems like there are definitely some like Fincherisms in there. I know he doesn't often write, but like there was some like kind of well, obviously Fincher did The Social Network with Aaron Sorkin, and there was like almost some pretty plain kind of Aaron Sorkinisms in there, especially the bit where the guy's like, walk with me, and then he's like talking to them as he's walking. That's like a kind of that's like a very kind of memed Aaron Sorkin style piece of writing. I mean, at its core, I mean, the film is really badly paced. It kind of, the first hour of the film is really, really boring, to put it kindly. It's like really, like the pace is like fast, and like it has that old Hollywood kind of quippy, witty dialogue style, which Herman Mankiewicz was like kind of known for having popularized, so that makes sense. But it doesn't really set up any clear conflict apart from the fact that he's an alcoholic and he's trying not to drink while he's writing.
I thought it was interesting that like they were using this sort of like quick, peppy, jazzy like quick paced jazz in the background, but the things you were actually watching and seeing were very mundane and kind of inconsequential. You were getting sort of the backstory to the backstory of the backstory, like way earlier than you needed it. Like you could have cut. So the film relies a lot on these flashbacks. So you at the beginning of the film you were presented with sort of a then current day Mankiewicz
with a screenwriter like subtitle as well.
Yes. Oh yeah, there's some you know, that's clever. When it intros a scene, you know how like in like any action film it will say London, England. Instead this has like, it's written like a script, so it's like exterior blah blah blah, year blah blah blah, which is, I thought was like a nice little
that was a cool
detail.
touch.
And so you got Mank writing in his bed. He's been in like a car accident, so he's got a bandage on his leg, and then it kind of tells a story in quite a Nolan-esque way, where you constantly firing off, I guess kind of Tarantino-esque, you going off in all sorts of directions before you come back to the actual like meat of things. But the problem of it is not so much that it does that it is what it's cutting back to doesn't feel like it really adds anything to what you're seeing in front of you. And it's only until way later in the film that you start actually appreciating what the puzzle pieces were assembling before you. I
mean, it certainly gets better in the second half. There's like a few standout scenes. At the beginning of the first hour of the film or so, I was really like disinterested. I just like wasn't. I was like watching it, and everything. There's a lot. It's delivering like a lot of information to you that you're supposed to be taking in, but it's hard to like understand what the purpose of that information is. Like the film is about a lot of things. It's like very political, but it's also clearly very personal, and like supposed to be kind of a little bit of a character study, but it's also like a critique of Hollywood. So it's like doing all of this. It's got all of this stuff going on. It's also sort of trying to be like relevant to like today's politics and stuff. It's really hard for me to say specifically what didn't work. It's like there were so many elements at play, and it was hard for me to figure out what I was supposed to really sort of care about, and there wasn't anything so strong about the film to really carry my interest that strongly. Like there are lots of really competent elements of the film if we want to talk about like aesthetic stuff. So like I really like the sound design of the film. Like it has that kind of tinny old-timey quality.
Yes, I was going to say that. Yeah, it sounds like it was recorded in the same way that it's shot in black and white in order to sort of imitate the era and the film that it's sort of so blatantly referencing it, similarly uses.
I have a problem
genuine
with the black
old
and white.
recording.
It's very, very well shot and really well lit, which so certainly paying good homage to Citizen Kane in its like really kind of dramatic and noirish shooting style. But I did have one thing aesthetically that really didn't gel with me was that it was clearly shot on a digital camera and edited in post, and I don't know why David Fincher of all people did that. I don't know if it was just out of ease.
It was too clean looking, wasn't it?
Yeah, we know that they can do this. Like David Fincher can afford to shoot on film, and like the Lighthouse was shot on film with fucking like antique lenses, and it looked fantastic. Even though it was a pain in the ass because they had to like overexpose everything because shooting on film everything's darker.
Okay.
Like the film is like gorgeously shot and the composition is great, and there's a really good montage in there as well, and the way it's directed, it does almost feel like you can really feel like the Orson Welles influence that like, I mean, Fincher is just really talented at directing. It's not really too much of a surprise that like, you know, it's like if you told a really good singer to do a cover of a song, right? Like he's hitting all of the notes like technically, but I don't know if there's anything, there's not much in the way of connecting tissue between like,
it lacks some of that like heart, that kind of raw kind of, it feels like a painting of a painting, like you say, like a cover.
It's not unoriginal though, it's just so like I couldn't say like, because if you wanted to do like a more populist like style of this film, it would be all about Citizen Kane, and it would have like recreate, because this is kind of half what I was expecting. It would be like way more focused, it would be more linear, you'd have way more Orson Welles, the guy who played Orson Welles, it would be more like on set, or you know, there would be like more like drama to it, whereas this film, for a start, the non-linear thing kind of, it's very confusing to keep track of where you are at any time, even with these like subheadings, and it kind of, when I felt like I was getting into the flow of some scenes, the way it would flash back would kind of, I would like start to lose interest. So like I did kind of enjoy some of the stuff with Gary Oldman in his bed, having like a little sort of aggro chemistry with the person he's dictating to, played by Lily Collins, who's
actually really good in this. I don't know, it's not that I don't like her as an actress, but often she stars in stuff that I really don't care for, like a lot of
she's
like
okay.
rom-coms and stuff. But she was pretty good.
I've never seen her be exceptional, and I don't think she was exceptional here either. If I had to pick my favourite actor in the film, it would actually be Amanda Seyfried. Is that how you say it?
She was really good in it, and again, another actress I'm not normally huge on.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen her in anything particularly great, but she's not really an actress I've ever really followed.
I've seen her in the absolutely impeccable Justin Timberlake starring In Time.
Wasn't she in Mean Girls?
Still haven't seen that film actually. But,
oh, bro, that's culture. You got to see Mean Girls.
We'll do it on the podcast sometime. I don't know.
I mean, what did you think about Gary Oldman though?
I thought there was like an understatedness to it. I think he has so much charisma just naturally. It's hard to know when he's playing someone that's real, how much he is sticking to that legitimacy, because oftentimes I did just kind of see Gary Oldman.
Yeah.
Like his part didn't feel enough to me like a character at points, but then again I don't know enough about the original, you know, the person to fully say that. One
thing that I found very weird is that at the time he's playing Herman Mankiewicz, he's supposed to be like 40. And Gary Oldman does not look 40, and it's kind of noticeable. Like his wife is so much younger than him, which I guess could be maybe she was in real life. I don't know. That's kind of.
I mean, that's fair. He definitely doesn't look his character's age, but then he is supposed to be a sort of crippling alcoholic who has ruined his body and aged himself significantly. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen Jeremy Clarkson nowadays, but he's 60, but he looks fucking like 900. Like, it's that kind of
Well,
scenario.
yeah, and he's smoking in like every scene. I mean, that wasn't really my issue. I mean, I thought Gary Oldman was good just because Gary Oldman is a good actor, even
he's
on
never
like,
not good.
I don't know if he's never not good, but like he's The Fifth Element might want to have a word with you, but
he knows
iconic.
What he's doing. He's iconic.
He's having a blast. But like, I wouldn't say Gary Oldman is like bad or anything. I think he's pretty good, but like, the film is so clearly leaning on him for a lot in terms of like emotion, And I'm not saying he did a bad job. I just think maybe he did it... Like, he's very over the top in some scenes and very understated in other scenes. And I do think there are, like, some scenes, especially with, like, some later events in the film, where he, like, delivers a lot of, like, really effective emotion, like, really subtly in a way that a less skilled actor would have to, like, scream and shout to portray. He's, like, there's no question whether Gary Oldman is a good actor or not. I just felt that, like, it's really hard to put my finger on it. It's just, it wasn't enough for the film, if that makes sense.
It wasn't quite like... It lacked that kind of X factor that kind of really, like, seals a performance. Like, sometimes there is just that. There is something to a performance you can't put your finger on that either makes it or breaks it. And I think a lot of people would understand that if you said that to them.
Yeah, it's hard to say if it's the writing or him. But yeah, he's good.
I think it's somewhere in the understated nature of the character for the large part. I mean, he is an alcoholic, so there's scenes where he's drunk and
he's really good at that.
He's sloshing around. He's great at that. But there's a kind of an emotional plainness to the character that's kind of hard to properly empathize with. Maybe I certainly enjoy the character and I think he's an interesting person to follow around, but do I really feel for the character? Do I really, like, connect with the character in any way? And I think that's, like, perhaps part of what you are missing. There is a kind of coldness. I guess perhaps that comes from the fact that it is, in being a biopic, some films can often sort of, in sticking to these historical facts, can sort of circumvent a lot of the actual human qualities of it. And I think in places this does do that. Not always, but...
I mean, I respect it for not doing the classic biopic formula, because those kind of films... A biopic where the name of the film is the name of the person... it's oftentimes you know exactly what you're going to get. You could basically read the Wikipedia page and get the same information. And I appreciate
like a theory of everything type.
Yeah, thing, like theory of everything, or like Bohemian Rhapsody, or like these kind of films. I appreciate that this film wasn't just rehashing stuff that is already... well, to be fair, it's kind of like an unknown story, but it didn't go through the formula, because there's like a clear arc in the film. Once you finished it, you can kind of see it, of this guy who's uninspired and kind of sort of washed up in a way, and he has to undergo certain events to kind of, and like witness these sort of like political injustices and realise how truly disenfranchised he is with Hollywood, to fully understand and like have the creative inspiration for the greatest work, and then they try and not credit him for it. Like that's a clear arc. You could easily run it through the Hollywood formula with a worse director. But in a way, I feel like if you did do that, I feel like David Fincher overcomplicates it and muddies it, especially with the non-linear thing. Maybe if you did run it through, there's a reason it's a formula, right? It's true that like I enjoyed Mank for being different in that sense, but I probably would have connected more with a more formulaic film, if that makes sense, because formulas work, right? It's just...
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah, I feel weird saying that like a film is like too ambitious.
I think the key distinction here is what it's being ambitious with, the material it's working with. I suppose we may delve slightly into spoilers from here on out, because, and I guess we kind of have dabbled a little bit anyway, but the key thing with Mank is that it's trying to tell, rather than telling a story of this is how we wrote and made Citizen Kane, it's more about how did the idea of the Citizen Kane script become, incepted, for want of a better word. How did... Conceived, there's a better word.
Yeah.
What did the writer have to go through to write that script? Because I've long thought, after first seeing Citizen Kane a little while back, not knowing much about the actual history of the time, that these people surely must be based on real actual people, because it seems like such a scathing satire and commentary on the world at the time, that it couldn't not be about like a then Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, it kind of was, wasn't it?
And this film confirms that. Yeah, it literally was very much in that sense. And it's about Mank coming into contact with these people, living and working in Hollywood, kind of being betrayed and disillusioned by the system, and then coming out the other side and becoming a sort of more well-rounded, or not well-rounded, but like a more kind
contented
artist. Yeah, like he sort of says goodbye to the big studio and sort of makes a piece of work for himself, a catharsis against the struggles he's gone through. The problem that David Fincher goes through, and perhaps this is tied to the fact that his late father, wrote the script. Perhaps he was reticent to get rid of anything.
Yeah.
But it's that the film starts perhaps 45 minutes too early. I think this film could have been at least half an hour shorter, if not even less. And you could even have more at the back end, because the film kind of abruptly ends. Bam, Citizen Kane came out and people loved it. You could have a bit more after that, like a kind of epilogue perhaps, that would have been quite interesting to see where the character goes. But in terms of what the film does include, you could easily not flash back the first 5 or 6 flashbacks, because so many of them feel like you could compartmentalize elements of them into one flashback and then just have that, and it's bam, you've just saved yourself all that time.
I feel like,
God, is it slow?
Yeah,
it's
I feel
so
like
slow.
I think that David Fincher might have set himself the challenge where he was like, I'm going to make a film about Citizen Kane as like the hook, and include next to no Citizen Kane as like a kind of twist gotcha to the audience, which is the kind of stuff he does, you know, like that kind of, it's kind of subversive in that way. And I respect it, but at the same time, I would be far more interested to watch a film that's maybe a bit more generic, but like about Orson Welles and Herman Mankiewicz sort of clashing, and then like the turbulent production of Citizen Kane, and all of the new things that they were doing that made Citizen Kane such a revolutionary film. Because I understand that like maybe he doesn't want to make a film that's like one of those Hollywood circle jerk films about how wonderful the movies are, you know, like a lot of these, you know, films could end up being, I'm trying to think off the top of my head of like a comparison of film about a director or an actor or something where it's about how brilliant, you know, it's the whole message is like, oh, they struggled but for their art. I understand that he didn't want to do that. At the same time, I can't overstress like how little I liked the flashback stuff, as you said, because I know why they did it. It's like a reference to Citizen Kane, right? Like how the film is just basically made up of flashbacks of unreliable narration. But
I thought,
what did the non-linear stuff add to this film? I don't really see.
Well, I thought they could have gone even more aggressively down that path. So when I was thinking of like how does one make a film about Citizen Kane, I thought they could really have gone in on like people talking about Mank in the same way that people talked about Charles Foster Kane. You know, how they kind of they you never really hear from the man himself. I thought that could have been like an entertaining way of doing it. Maybe that wouldn't have worked, but you know.
Well, they clearly draw parallels, don't they?
Yeah, but like I thought it'd been funny if you go to like one character and they say this about like this time of Mank's life, and you go like, you could kind of cobble that together from the footage they already had from it. Mm-hmm. I think that could have been a more entertaining and like energetic way of presenting the story that they had.
Also, like, Orson Welles was just such an entertaining character back in the day, and the guy they got was pretty good. Like, I don't know if he was just like an impersonator or if he's like a known actor.
He nailed the voice.
Oh, he was great. Like, why would you not want more of that? Like people forget, because I feel like, you know, Orson Welles just isn't relevant today in the same way that he was back then. But he was a hilarious guy, and I don't know why we haven't had like just a straight biopic on Orson Welles, because there's so much to work with there, because he was such an interesting guy and he did so many strange projects and amazing things in his life. I don't understand even if you want to make it more about Herman Mankiewicz and focus on him, why you wouldn't at least, because in a way in this film Orson Welles is kind of, he's unseen but he's almost like the villain of the film, which is an interesting route to take. So why would you not take that further? Like maybe because clearly historical accuracy is no goal here. There's nothing to worry over. So if you don't care about that, why? That seems to me to be the most interesting, compelling thing you could do with the film. Have it be the clash between these two, and this weird thing where they got this guy to write the scripts, but they didn't want to credit him; they just wanted to pay him.
Yeah.
Why not do that? Like, that's a really interesting and inherently critical thing of, because Orson Welles' Citizen Kane is essentially like birth of the auteur theory in cinema. The key voice of a film is the director, which is a very popular and like a very a lens which we look through film in that's kind of unavoidable now. But like, obviously there are lots of criticisms of that you can have, that this one person behind the film is like the sole main voice behind the film, and there's a really interesting story there, especially in the terms of like, in terms of the way the film talks about the whole credit thing, about how spoiler, at the end of the film he decides, no, this is the best thing I've written, I would like to have credit, I don't care so much about the money. And Orson Welles is angry, and he throws the stuff, he throws a thing into the wall the exact same way Charles Foster Kane does in Citizen Kane, which then inspires the thing.
He adds it to the script,
which like that's like the kind of, that was like the most fun scene of the film. I don't know why you wouldn't want like a whole film like pursuing that conflict. Instead, the conflict, I don't know, like the conflict seems to be mostly completely internal to Mankiewicz. It's him like going around seeing stuff that's affecting him, which is, that could be interesting, but I just don't feel like the film really delivers on it.
I don't know why it necessarily had to be so fueled by flashbacks as well. Like I feel like there's two stories you could have told with this film. The one you said, which I think would have been really interesting, or the one that the film tells through its flashbacks. But this film tries to kind of do both, and it's not inherently wrong with that, but it just doesn't end up being particularly gripping in either, because the flashbacks kind of deflate a lot of the tension and character drama within them, because you kind of know where the character is at the end of all of it. So there's not really the high stakes of like, well, what happens to this character? Does he lose his job? Does he, what consequences does he face for being a voice against the norm in Hollywood? It kind of, there's not really much tension, but the film, to its credit, does kind of, beyond the halfway point, start to kind of justify itself more. It does start to tie things together, build towards a somewhat like interesting conclusion.
Yeah, I mean the best scene outside of the one I just talked about with Orson Welles was the one that everyone's going to talk about will be like the drunk scene, right?
Yes.
In fact, it's got really good editing as well, just as an off note. Like, the film is really well edited, apart from the whole flashback thing, but I mean, that was kind of in the script, right? Outside of that, the film is really, really snappily edited. There were two other scenes I really liked. I really liked the scene where he's at the kind of party with the actress, and they're talking about like Hitler and politics and FDR. That's
a great scene.
That was a really good
right,
scene.
Had
some really good dialogue, and like the way it's shot is very Fincher. There's lots of kind of like static shots. They're kind of like the same shots, and it's kind of just cutting between them, getting like some great like reactions. It's like really subtly done.
That scene had a lot of tension in it as well. I was ready for that.
Yeah, it was really tense, but also like the dialogue was fun. Like, it actually felt like people talking to each other.
Yeah.
It had the great line where she goes, "That Hitler gives me the jeepers," or something.
But yeah, because I was kind of forever waiting in the flashback scenes, like, all right, this is going to be the scene where he fucks his career up, and that's why he's in this position. So that was a moment where I was like, oh god, they're talking about politics. He's going to put his foot in his mouth. He's going to say something, because he starts siding with like the socialists, the sort of uprising, because obviously it's all coming around in the just before the McCarthy era of the witch hunts and stuff. But there's sort of murmurs of socialism and communism, and he's kind of siding with the socialists because he's like, he's
a writer in Hollywood. Yeah.
So for that, the scene managed to really hold the tension right to the end, be super compelling. And then, as did the drunk scene where he interrupts the party by basically essentially giving out the script, giving out the story of what he's then later going to write in Citizen Kane, but he's doing it to be scornful and confrontational to the people that have ruined not ruined his life, but ruined the life of someone who, another spoiler, one of his friends who kills himself as a consequence of this like fake news thing they put out to the smear campaign against the socialists. He tries to take them down a peg, and in doing so loses his job, loses his career, and his standing in Hollywood. Gary Oldman in that scene, he fucking knows how to play a good drunk.
Yeah, he was wasted.
I was so convinced.
Yeah, that was a great standout scene as well. It wasn't enough at that point for me to really. I wonder if this film will like grow on me, because I feel like there's a lot of complexity to it that I probably didn't get from this first watch.
Yeah.
And it was
big
struggling to hold
slow
my
burn.
attention. Yeah, it was so slow. I wasn't gripped by it. I wasn't like, studying every scene. I was kind of like, my attention was waning.
Very few scenes really felt like they had the kind of weight and power that a David Fincher scene should have. For its presentation, outside of its visual aesthetic, and the competency of the way it's
a generally gorgeous
pieced
film
together.
though.
Yeah, but outside of that, it didn't really feel very Fincher at all. I think perhaps the fact that it was written by his father could have had an effect on that, but again, that's speculation. It's a curious film. It's a hard one to really kind of put in a box and kind of try and label it. It's pretty unique, but it's also full of flaws.
I will return to it.
It's a sort of film that once I got to the end and I understood what it was, where it was going and building to, I could see myself enjoying it more potentially in the future, because I'm not waiting for it to get interesting. I'm looking for the cues and the builds in character from everything around him. I don't know.
Yeah, 5 out of 10.
I guess what I'm 5 out of 10. Damn, I was gonna go 6. Damn, 5. Damn.
I mean, I'm straight down the middle. There's like a decent amount I liked. I think it's like just generally competently made, well acted for the most part, and like has some real standout scenes, some good writing in it. But there's a lot that holds it back for me as well. So I'm trying to be fair, because I've got a big Fincher bias. Realistically, if this was someone else, I would think the same thing. This film's a mess. I'm sorry, Fincher. I love you. Please do another film,
kind of a mess.
And don't take 6 years to do it this time, please.
Yeah. Perhaps that's a part of it as well, is that, we're waiting so long for
I
this
had big
next
expectations.
great... Like, Fincher is such a consistent director. Like, he has put out the odd dud that no one really cares about, or, people don't remember as fondly as others. But, 9 times out of 10, he's coming out with hits, and this just wasn't really one of them.
It's still better than Alien 3, so...
I have a strangely soft spot for Alien 3. Both featuring Charles Dance.
Yeah, true. Charles Dance, yeah, fuck.
Really great source material idea that you could take in many directions. This film kind of fails to live up to the promise of being a film about Citizen Kane. Is not gonna... It's such a tough thing to live up to. So there's that. But there's also it's very slow to get started and never really leaves first gear for the entire film. Really, it starts to get more interesting in the second half, but by that point, you're kind of worn out by it. And the more juicy stuff is about what he then does with the information and the experience he's gleaned, and not nearly enough time is spent with him as he's writing the screenplay. So there you go. A 5 from Rupert and a 6 from me. But now we're going to talk about the daddy,
the
big
OG.
papa, the OG.
I don't know if you've ever heard of this film before. I recommended it to you, Adam. This film's called Citizen Kane. Came out in 1941. It was a pretty big deal.
I think I'd heard whispers, rumorings of its reputation.
For the unwashed masses who have never seen Citizen Kane, which is most normal people, I think, to be fair. Citizen Kane was a film in 1941, directed by Orson Welles, produced by Orson Welles. Was it written by Orson Welles? I mean, watch Mank, I guess. And starring Orson Welles, don't know if I said that, as the main character, Charles Foster Kane. It's about like a newspaper media tycoon from a pretty wealthy background, and his dying words getting investigated. Looking back on it, I don't know, first time I ever saw it, I never really drew this comparison, but this was basically the birth of the noir genre. Not just in terms of looks, but I didn't realise like so many of like
It is
the noir
surprisingly
conventions.
noir.
Yeah, like the whole like, you know, unreliable narrators telling the story, and you've got a detective going around trying to figure out a mystery, and the non-linear story. Yeah, it's very, very ahead of its time. There's a lot of interesting trivia around it as well, which they could have included it in Mank. I guess they didn't. But yeah, it's generally accepted to have revolutionised the way cinematography worked in films. Obviously, there was some really, really great cinematography before it, which this film takes loads of influence from, like the German expressionist films. You can see so much of that in this film.
Well, that's particularly with like the weird lighting and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And like the first opening bit where it's just a shot of Charles Foster Kane's mansion on a hill, and it looks like a kind of Tim Burton set, if you wanted to draw like a modern comparison.
It's super gothic.
It's super gothic. It's got like this, you know, dark, disturbing music. So it's clearly like really influenced by films like Metropolis, or you know, something like that. Like it's got that German aesthetic to it, and a kind of like European vibe, even though it's, you know, a very American film. It's got that kind of European art house style in a way.
It's remarkable, really, just how ahead of its time it was. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who watch this who are very familiar with it, and there'll be people that watch this that aren't at all. Because, like you say, because it's so old at this point, it has kind of lost its impact and relevancy to like a modern day. Like the ideas from this have been so distilled down into what we you know, consume every day, that perhaps to some people this would seem old-fashioned. But even to me, I watched this film and it still feels so fresh.
Yeah, it's so
feels
modern feeling,
really vibrant and interesting. I think that's what caught me off guard when I watched it the first time, like what made me really love it. I was expecting, it kind of begins in this like really drab sort of way where, so you get your classic Rosebud scene, and then it cuts to like them doing like the newspaper bit of like reading out like Xanadu. Yeah, Charles Foster Kane was and he did this with his life. He tried to be a politician, you know, and it does this for like a good like 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's such a strange way to open a film, isn't it?
And I was like, is this how it's gonna go? Is this what's going on? And then you cut out of the newsreel to them all smoking in this like darkened room, going, "Oh, this fucking newsreel shit. This doesn't say anything."
Can't like see any of their faces, like the way it's shot.
Brilliant.
Like the guy is like covered in shadow. It's so stylish
and just full of smoke. Like it's brilliant. I knew I was gonna love the film from that moment. As soon as that newsreel turned off and they were all just in the room going, "Oh, fucking hell, boys, this is shit. We need some better stuff than this. We don't know." We just got told what the man was. We don't know who the man is. But I think what's so interesting in the meta of this film is that, so Orson Welles was given full creative control in this project as a 24-year-old.
Oh, that's actually so depressing.
I know. What have we fucking done, eh? But
it was like unheard of at the time, basically. Like before this, and even after this, like studio control in films was like the norm. Yeah. A film was more by a studio than it was by a director.
Yes, exactly.
It was like analysed and criticised.
Yeah, a director was more a guy that got final say behind the camera than he was the guy that got final say behind the film. You know, it wasn't so much done that way. So Orson Welles got really famous off of his radio broadcast of War of the Worlds, which at the time was so well performed, but taken so seriously by some of the viewers that it caused some like genuine
it caught some
like
people off guard.
Outbreaks of panic.
Yeah.
But, you know, the studios took notice. They were like, this guy's got something. If he can read out a piece of fiction so convincingly on the radio that he would, genuinely cause panic in the streets in certain areas of America, that we got to hire him. So that kind of what got him the gig. But even then, that doesn't mean you're just going to suddenly get the most important film maybe in the history of films ever made. You know, the one that spawned so many modern conceptions about what a film is and what filmmaking is.
Yeah.
It could still have just been a fucking flop, like of just like some dude. Like the amount of vision Orson Welles had cannot be undersold.
Yeah, and like the whole directing thing is incredible, and we'll probably talk about that more. But one thing like I feel like doesn't get mentioned enough is how good Orson Welles is as an actor, because like in this film he is like his acting is like he's acting like one of the best actors of all time already, like, and he's 24, 25 years old.
He's such a pro. He's
like,
such a pro.
He is insanely good. Like the amount of emotion and like he almost makes all the other actors in this film look bad. I mean, don't get me wrong. The rest of the acting, if you had one complaint about the film, would be like some of the acting is like a little bit dated. It doesn't really bother me that much because I've seen old films and it doesn't really.
It's a product of its time.
Yeah.
Like,
but like you
do kind of have to acknowledge that.
He knew because he doesn't. He actually holds up like so well. Like his performance is
so well.
Like even the acting by him is kind of ahead of its time in its own way. Like he's like for a big portion of the film absolutely slathered in this old age makeup.
Well, that's amazing.
Must have taken hours, and like this is something we see all the time today. And the old age makeup, for a start, looks pretty fucking good for like a 40s film.
They did a really good job.
Like doesn't take me out of the film at all, really.
It must have been a lot of work they did with the lighting and everything as well, because perhaps it's aided by the black and white. I don't know what they did, but the fact that it's so good for its era is so good. Like better than some stuff we were getting in like the 90s and like the
it's better than some of the
even.
digital stuff we get nowadays.
Oh well, yeah,
it's like way better.
But in conjunction with that, he also had to play a character at like multiple ages. You know, a young man, several years throughout his like middle ages, and then as an elderly man, and he plays all three expertly. Like,
it's his character movement as well, like his body, like the way his body moves in that smashing up the room scene. He moves like an old dude. Like I don't know if he practiced that. Like fuck. That was great.
There was a point in the film I genuinely forgot whether he was the young actor or the middle-aged actor.
I forget every scene. I just see him as the age he's playing every time.
Yeah, that's how fucking good it is. The only time the makeup ever really kind of slightly takes me out of it, well, doesn't take me out of it, but it becomes kind of noticeable, is when he's like really elderly. But the stuff when he's and that's only when they do a close-up as well. Sometimes he just looks too young. But fucking hell, the makeup they did on him when he was like middle-aged, through his gradual phases, I don't know, when he's like 30s and then 50s and whatever. It's flawless.
Seamless. I like, I was thinking like coming back to this, I've seen it before, I really enjoyed it. I was thinking like, I'm going to be noticing all of the directorial flourishes and all this kind of stuff. But really like, the main thing that I just was blown away by is how good he is, and like don't get me wrong, like the way the film is shot is like amazing. I didn't notice some of the long takes they do in this film. The shot that really like blew me away this time, and I had to like rewind it because I was like watching it, but I was kind of like engrossed in the scene, so I wasn't really thinking like has there been a cut, and I was like, has there been a cut? So I like rewound it. It's the first scene where his second wife is in the opera, and it starts off as like a shot of her getting like her costume ready, and she's like practicing her singing, and it's like panning out, and there's all these extras in the background like playing actors on this play. The camera's like panning back, and then you see the shadow of the curtain lifting up, which is like showing you, that the play has begun, and she starts singing, and then it like pans all the way up, like far, all the way up to the two guys in the rafters, and he like holds his nose because she's a stinker or whatever, she can't sing. So like I was just like, how the fuck, like that is like that's so far ahead of its time. Like you can watch a lot of really really great like 40s and 30s films, but you seldom see anything like that. Yeah, that was mine. I don't know how. It's also the kind of thing that I feel like a lot of people wouldn't have noticed.
So it's the thing. A good piece of editing, a good piece of flowing camera work transports you into the scene. Really, a lot, And to be fair, I didn't really notice that was one take. I remembered the shot because it's a fantastic bit, but I didn't really click in my head that it was a one take.
It's just like there's so much information in it. It's like it's showing.
It sucks you in. Like a good piece of camera work like that just transports you into a scene. It's when you're taken out of it that you more tend to notice it. You're like that it's bad, you know.
Another great one is the bit where he goes to interview his second wife for the first time, and she's too drunk and depressed or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And the camera zooms through this like gate, through this big metal, not gate, like a sign, and it goes through the metal sign, and then it goes down onto the glass roof, and then there's like a blur cut as it sort of the camera goes into the building. Yeah. Obviously, you notice the blur cut. Still like a pretty far ahead of its time technique. But apparently the way they did that, the camera going through, is as the camera got close, this was like a technical prop they had made to like pull the parts apart, so the camera could actually go through it. Like you say, it's just the kind of thing you wouldn't notice, but I guess off your brain, unless you're thinking about it, if you shoot the scene the way it's supposed to be shot, like the best way of shooting it, if such a thing exists, you just won't think about it. It's just that good.
It's amazing how much like detail they put into this that no one would ever have noticed, and it's the sort of detail you expect films to go through nowadays. But like you say, with this studio process of yesteryear, of the golden age of Hollywood, that just wouldn't have been put in place. You had sets, you had actors, and that was it. You got them to work. Like the idea of being like particularly technical with cameras was, I mean, fuck it. It was new technology at the time to be able to speak in movies, let alone do clever camera work.
Another scene that had really good set design was the big speech he gives when he's doing his political rally. It's really like an iconic shot of him on stage with the big
angle.
With the big picture of him behind him, and he's giving this big impassioned speech. And the set design's amazing. It's like obviously 1984. Pretty sure that hadn't been written yet. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure when that was written.
I'm not sure when that was written. But it's kind of like that kind of proto-dictator scene. I mean, Hitler was still alive when this was made, right? So pretty relevant
scathing
for the time. An aesthetic that has been copied so many times now that if this film was made today, you'd kind of look at that and be, that's a bit on the nose. But the way it's done, it's not even like so overt. Like he's not wearing like an armband or anything, but like the way it's shot and the way the way the set is made is like so clearly communicating that to you, even though when he's up on stage you can actually, you kind of get charmed by him yourself, because he is absolutely. He is just so he is such a great character, and he's so well played. I love that whole scene. And apparently the way they did it, he was like, the audience is like a paper cutout or something, and like just like poked holes in it and moved light around to make it look like there were people moving in the crowd. Don't exactly know how that works, but another amazing bit of film wizardry that was going on behind the camera.
I think what I really love about it is its presentation of the ideas. The way it tells its story through flashbacks and interactions through characters, because a film can be as technically marvelous as you like if it's not compelling, as we saw with Mank, an example of like a technically interesting, pretty film, plenty of good performances, some great performances, and it's kind of let down by a somewhat uninteresting plot.
Yeah, like this thing is really like, Citizen Kane is quite like ruthlessly structured. Like there's not really like a wasted scene. Like every scene in the film kind of needs to be there. You could probably cut one or two scenes and it would still make sense, but unlike Mank, every single time a scene is happening, I'm feeling it. I know I can feel the progression where it's going, even though it's told in a non-linear way. It's kind of,
and you're absorbed by it as well.
It's
like so engaging.
It's like constantly. So there's no fat on the bone. It's like everything you need and nothing you don't, with like enough flash to keep you going. I don't know like what your favourite element of the film is. Like for me personally, my favourite part, I love all of it, but my favourite part of the film is the element of him and his second wife, and how he's kind of like essentially like torturing her and abusing her for his own like power trip.
Right.
I really like that bit because I mean, it leads to the most satisfying moment of the film, which is him basically throwing a temper tantrum, and because he finally, you know, gets what he deserves, and he kind of has to come to accept that he can't have, you know, control over everything, because his whole character is essentially someone who is traumatized in his own way, but is fighting to have as much control as he can, and can't accept it when he is rejected on like any level really, and it's really satisfying. Like the stuff with his wife is in a way kind of funny, like with the Italian opera teacher. Kind of enjoy that was an element of the film that could have been really dated, but it's actually still pretty funny, but really sad as well. Like especially since you know from the flashbacks, from the flash forwards, how kind of broken she is after the event, although she is clearly like happier without him. Like how basically this guy basically ends up ruining her life. It's really quite sad, but it has that like element of lightness to it that keeps it from being completely dour. I really enjoy that. And then there's so many just like iconic moments, like that shot I was talking about, or the bit where he's like clapping. It's just like so genius.
The clapping scene. I
don't know why it's so good, but it's just so like there's something about it. It's just so intense.
There was one quite small, understated scene that I particularly enjoyed on my repeat watch the other day, which was after the first night of his wife at the opera. His closest sort of colleague and friend has to do the review for it, and he gets drunk and only finishes half the review. Kane comes in, finds that the review is just absolutely awful, and is like tearing his wife to shreds. And rather than be angry with him and, you know, sort of wake him up and do whatever, like, you know, kick his ass or something, he finishes the review, and he writes it as he was writing it. He makes it as scathing as he can, and I think that's a really interesting moment of the character's psychology, and one that, you know, I'd still have to sort of stop and think about to really unpick what it kind of
I love
says.
The explanation the guy gives in the sort of flash forward bit where he's like, I think he did it just because when he got exposed for having his affair, the newspapers wrote Kane found fooling around with singer in, you know, inverted comma, apostrophe, whatever, you know, punctuation, and he's literally just bitter that they said like like the entire thing about him pursuing the singing career of his wife, and literally like pushing her and forcing her to do it, even though she's like miserable as a result, like purely out of his own vindictiveness. Like he clearly has like a very face level understanding of people, because she says, I you know, I kind of wanted to be a singer, and once he heard that, he was like, well, right, she wants to be a singer, so how can I use that to make myself feel good? It's quite like interesting.
And yours, I guess, thanks to Mank, we now have a bit of like backstory to the characters that they're referring to there, because Amanda Seyfried is essentially the real life version of the singer character, who would have been this sort of somewhat unsuccessful actress. I mean, she did start in like Broadway plays and apparently only one feature film, and was kind of this sort of love affair of this wealthy newspaper tycoon. I guess it's interesting to see those parallels, like the reality and like this version of it is. Mank paints it as far more of an equitable, amicable relationship, whereas this paints it far more tragic. Personally, I prefer the tragedy. I think, you know, I think it's much more compelling. In terms of a core element, rather than just a specific part of the plot that I love about this film, is the way we are always told about Charles Foster Kane. When I first watched it, I never really realised, because I was so engrossed in like gaining more information. I was like, I really want to know who this guy is. Tell me more, like just lapping it up. But on second watch, I realised you never know who he is.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of the whole point of the film, is that every scene you see him in, apart from the very first one where he says his dying words, he is speaking through someone else's mouth, you know.
Well, it's someone that basically recounting stories of him, right? As opposed
exactly. So, or someone else is speaking through his mouth, or however you want to put it. Like the words and the emotions that he gives are all kind of inferred, and I guess that's why the scene where he does his speech is so like dramatic and grand, and in this vast, you know, pictures, posters of himself behind him, because it's being told by people who were there and who are remembering in this exaggerated fashion. For all we know, like, it could have been way smaller scale. It could have been way less aggressively borderline fascistic, you know. But it's like the effect he had on people. Like, Charles Foster Kane is really barely even a character in the film, if you think about it in those terms. Because he is just a memory living through other people. And I think there's something so powerful in that the film is so built around this one person, and yet he has no voice. He has but one legitimate line in the entire film, which is Rosebud.
Well, now that you put it like that, it kind of goes to show how influential this film was. It just sounds like Memento. Like, clearly, you know, you couldn't have a film like Memento, which is like, you know, it's that unreliable narrator thing where one of the most intriguing mysteries of the film is like who this character actually is, and having to accept that there's no way to ever actually, you know who someone is, especially where, you know, not having met them. It always, you know, you could almost say it's kind of like, you know, we talked about Cure and how that film is like very like isolated, and it's all kind of about how futile like empathy can be in a way, how it's like you can never truly like understand what it's like to be someone else. So I guess that this film is kind of like the proto version of those. Obviously it's not particularly similar to Cure or Memento in any way, but those kind of themes.
It just goes to show how far people have taken those core like elements, those ideas, because you don't have to do a film identical to Citizen Kane for it to be obviously influenced by it. It doesn't have to be a noir investigation.
Well, I think we're so far ahead now that I don't know if there is a film that exists today that isn't influenced by Citizen Kane in some way.
Right, exactly. It's the progenitor of like most modern cinema.
The staging as well. Like, I know all of this stuff had been done before Citizen Kane, but the way Citizen Kane did it, like the way Charles Foster Kane is like framed and how the characters are framed in general is like so visually dramatic and engaging. Like the scene you were talking about where he goes to write the negative review about his wife. He's essentially like taking control of the situation, and the frame is like, it's, you know, the classic rule of thirds. It's got like 3 sections. You've got the empty space in the middle. You've got his face as a close up, and it's kind of like he's kind of looking down at the typewriter, and then on the other side of the frame you have the guy coming through in the office, and obviously because of perspective he looks smaller, which obviously like kind of relates to what's going on in the scene, because, you know, Charles Foster Kane he's taking control of the situation, and he's basically disempowered this person, and then he, you know, fires him in the same scene. And the guy, you know, he's kind of out in the open space and he looks small. So like just small details like that. Obviously other films had done this, but the way Citizen Kane did it is, it's just, it was, I wish I could, you know, be back in 1941 in America to watch this in the cinema and see how people reacted to it.
That.
Yeah.
I know. But perhaps part of our appreciation of this film is understanding what effect it had. And maybe that's part of why it didn't really take off. I mean, it was critically successful, but it wasn't beloved. Now it is, you know, and perhaps that's because it needed that time for people to understand what effect it was going to have.
I just want to know what beat this film for Best Picture in 1941.
Should we look it up?
Let's look it up.
Oh my God, it was How Green Was My Valley.
Well, wait, what?
How Green Was My Valley. Now,
I'll be real with
you.
Clearly, that film whatever the fuck that is, must be fucking 10/10.
Well, it is in the United States National Film Registry.
A lot of films are, mate.
Okay, fair enough. I literally know nothing about this film. It's by John Ford, though, so, you know, I've heard of them. I've heard of him.
Yeah, I know John Ford.
It's got Donald Crisp in it. That's such a good name, Donald Crisp.
I think I've heard that name. But yeah, clearly this film should have won.
Oh, and Walter Pigeon. This guy. Oh, this film's full of pure. Oh man.
I'm gonna have to watch this film to know what makes it so good. But I have a feeling that this film was a bit snubbed. I'm glad it won Best Screenplay because it's obviously a fantastic screenplay, basically a perfect screenplay. My only complaints about this film are some very small dated elements, but thinking about it, I just don't think that can really affect my rating. So it's a 10. Citizen Kane. It's the Citizen Kane of films. It's literally a byword for masterpiece. It's that good. I absolutely 100% agree. I feel like if we gush any more about this film, we'll never fucking stop recording, so I guess it's best to cut our losses. I also would give this film a 10. I seem to recall, Rupert, when I first watched this film, you'd given it an 8. So what changed? What were the things you had a problem with? I generally have a habit of rating a film slightly lower because I rate a film pretty much once the credits are rolling, I rate it, which I probably shouldn't do, but I want to rate it within the day, so I have my Letterboxd diary in order. So I just rate it with my initial ratings, and I remember being like, wow, that was really good, and oftentimes I will rate something and it will like sit with me or it won't sit with me. So like sometimes I'll give something an 8 and I'll go back and be like, this is more of a 7 or 6 if I was really drunk or whatever when I was watching it. But like I don't know, like I don't know, I really liked it the first time I watched it, but it was like one of those things where like a few months after, thinking back to Citizen Kane, I was like, I can remember so many scenes from that film, and like I could tell you very clearly what happens in it. Like not that many films are that engaging, especially from the 40s.
Because even that's a high accolade for any film, because especially a film you've only watched the one time, like to be able to like. There are plenty of films I adore that I couldn't like piece together for you like bit by bit. But it just kind of shows just how upper echelon Citizen Kane really is. Yeah,
it's just like it's just so depressing that it was made by a fucking 25-year-old. Jesus.
I know. One day, Rupert.
I just don't I don't understand how just how talented Orson Welles is. Man, Orson Welles. I need to watch more films of his. I've seen so few of his films. In fact,
fun fact: Orson Welles is my great granduncle.
If we ignore the fact that his surname is spelled differently.
It's spelled differently. Nah, it's pure chat. I've got the Wells blood. I've got the Orson Welles blood. Trust me.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Stranger things have happened. Where was he born? He was American, right? I always think of him as British. I don't know why. He's got like a very... the old-timey accent has much more...
It's that English transatlantic accent, because it does have
that elocution, the way they talk.
Well, it was like the kind of American received pronunciation type thing. So they were almost trying to sound as like British as possible.
Especially like in Citizen Kane, where he's like the young boy and he's like doing the dancing with the girls. He kind of like gives me like Cambridge student vibes. Like on the pre-drinks, I imagine that's what they do. They have a boardroom and then make women dance for them. I just imagine like it just gives me specifically like Cambridge posh Eton boy. He gives me those kind of vibes. But that's just purely the character. I don't know what he was like in real life. He turned into a weird old fat man with still a great voice.
Oh man, I mean, I've seen. I think that's the real shame. Is I've seen fuck all of the rest of his work. I've seen The Stranger. I believe did he direct that? I believe he did.
Yeah, he directed.
Which was it wasn't that mad of in terms of what I had seen from this. It was just quite a standard movie, but it was
fun little thriller. Yeah.
And he's great as well. And bold of him to play the villain in that film.
You need to see if you enjoy him as a persona, you really need to see F for Fake.
I'm so waiting to watch that
I
film.
I know you'd love it, and it's like one of the most watchable. It's like it'll be like the quickest hour and a half you ever have. It's literally just
so
him.
ready for that.
He's just the weirdest dude. There's like a bit where he's like in a restaurant and he's just talking to the camera, and at the end of what he's saying, he just goes, he like dips his fingers in the wine, just throws it, and goes over the shoulder for luck. Blah, blah, blah. It's like the weirdest fucking dude, but it was just great. It's literally just him walking around dressed as a magician. Perving on sexy Italian models and shit. Like, it's just so fucking great. He
When
was
was
such a
it?
character.
Like 80s or something?
70s, I think.
70s. Damn.
Could be wrong. But, you know,
Damn.
great guy.
One absolute legend. One absolute legend.
What a unit.
One absolute unit. And I guess that kind of brings us on to that brings us to the end of our discussion and onto what we picked for next week.
It's your turn, mate.
I guess it is my turn. Umming and ahhing. I guess I'll pose you a couple of thoughts.
Okay.
I have. One is I'm intrigued about watching the new Riz Ahmed film Sound of Metal, and I think a good accompaniment to a film about a man drumming would be another film about a man drumming, Whiplash, which is, you know, from what you've told me, the films aren't necessarily similar in their themes, more aesthetically similar, but still could be interesting. And on the other side, I was just flicking through Netflix today and I happened upon Falling Down with Michael...
Oh, yeah.
What's his face?
Never seen that film.
Michael Douglas.
Oh, Michael Douglas, right.
Michael Douglas. So yeah, I remember distinctly me and my dad being on a golf course once, like for like some kind of party, a gathering, like in the house, the golf club part of it, and he was bemoaning the fact that we were in a golf club at all, and he was like,
so middle class.
I once saw this great film. It was called Falling Down, and in that film, he goes on a golf course and he approaches. Some golfers are like, "Hey, get off the course," and then he goes up to them. He's like, "Fuck you, man! Family should be having like picnics here, man." And he like fucks the golfers up. And Dad was like, "Yeah, it's one of my favorite films because I fucking hate golf." So I was like,
Love it.
I saw it and I was like, sick. We've got to watch this film now. So
Well, I mean,
Down or
I'm gonna force you to choose because it's your choice, Adam. And I will not encroach upon your rights.
I feel like I've given such a personal anecdote about Falling Down that
Oh, and I haven't seen it. Normally, I don't know if it's been for every film, but normally, what's happened, it's something that I've already seen. So it'd be interesting to do.
well, the last two times we've both seen them before, and this is brand new territory.
It'd be good to do
Neither of
something
us have
neither of us
seen
have seen. Yeah.
Okay, let's do
Falling
it.
Down. Let's do it. Peace out.
Do you want to do a little outro? Just a quick one.
My outro goes like this. Peace out, bitches. We've been internally screening.
I was more thinking, you know, thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. Smash the subscribe button. I love you. Adam loves you.
I do.
Internally Screening is
Especially
the
if
best
you've watched
podcast on the internet.
It is. One day we'll put these up on Spotify. And yes, I do love you. If you watch all the way to the end, then you have a special place in my heart.
If you're listening right now.
And if your name is Jacob Rodman, because that's the only person that gets to the end of these.
Jacob!